Once a year, people gather to celebrate the military defeat of an invading army. Most of the people doing the celebrating have never been to the country in question, let alone live there. Commercialism, and the American tradition of, it's a holiday, we can market it, has made it a much more important holiday in the United States than even in its own country. I'm talking, of course, about Hanukkah.
The opinions expressed in this video are my own. They do not represent my employer, my household, my parents, my cats, all dogs, or some fish. 100% Jill by volume, your mileage may vary. Enjoy responsibly.
I grew up in New York City, but I've lived in Texas for long enough that I don't assume anyone around me has any point of reference for Judaism beyond the basics. So let's do a quick rundown, huh? According to the Jewish calendar, it is the year 5781. That means that if we lived in the Steven universe, Jewish culture would have been on this planet for almost as long as the crystal gems. Judaism is an ethno-religion. This means that we are both a religion, but also a people. So you can be Jewish without being religious, that's called being a secular Jew, or you can become Jewish even if you weren't born into a Jewish family. A more recent and frustratingly better understood example of this in pop culture is The Mandalorians. No one questioned that Sasha Banks, Katie Sackhoff, Tamora Morrison, and Pedro Pascal were of a people when there were spaceships and lightsabers and pretty sweet helmets involved. So let's apply that to real-world analogs, yeah? We should probably move on before I start quoting Adam Sandler. One of the most important tenets in Judaism is tikkun olam. Directly translated, this means repair the world. The concept is if we keep doing good things, it'll make the Messiah arrive faster. And this way, if they don't show up, or if you don't believe in them at all, you're just leaving the world a better place than when you got here. Basically, leave no trace camping, but, life. It is second, however, to a lesser known, but still extremely important tenet. 3 Jews, 5 opinions. Judaism has a long and proud tradition of arguing and debating amongst ourselves over rules and traditions, and then publishing those arguments in supplementary works over the course of centuries and millennia. There's commentary and debate all through the Talmud, which is basically why it exists, the Midrash, also why that exists, and there's even commentary interspersed in the Haggadah, which is the prayer book we read at the Seders at Passover. All of these are, at their base parts, internet flame wars that got published and saved. Imagine putting together that fan lore entry. Because this is something that comes up pretty much any time Judaism gets discussed in non-Jewish only spaces, I thought I'd put this here to get out ahead of any questions that might show up in my comments. In fact, when I originally gave this as a lecture in 2018, I made this slide specifically knowing that it would get a lot of use elsewhere. It has. Anyway, just don't assume all Jews are Zionists, because that's categorically untrue. They tried to kill us, they didn't, let's eat, is the refrain of most Jewish holidays, and kind of explains how we got here. If you look back at history, it feels like every 75 years or so, the leaders of the dominant culture go, hey, those guys over there, yeah, them, fuck them. And well, it's 5781, so it's happened a lot. We started in Jerusalem and it just sort of slowly worked our way out. We're a diaspora, but also
Asgard is not a place. It's a people.
There's even records of Jews in the Han Dynasty of China. I recommend checking that out on Wikipedia because it's pretty interesting. I'll link it below. Anyway, we're everywhere. Deal with it. Jerusalem was under the rule of Alexander the Great, and then after he died, it was sort of an ever-shifting rotation of the Greeks, the Seleucids, the Ptolemaics. It was a lot. A man named Mattathias was the head of the Maccabees. That was the name of their family. He was a priest in the temple. Put a pin in that. It's gonna come back. Because who ruled the area kept changing, so did the rules. One king was like, just do what you want, just pay your taxes, we're good.
There's no rules! Let's just start back on.
And then the next guy came in,
There's one rule!
Antiochus IV Epiphanes. His take was, no, you're all gonna worship me, you're all gonna worship Zeus, and we're gonna take over your temple and rededicate it to Zeus. Yeah, let's go ahead and kill a pig over there on that altar. Yeah, okay. Obviously that didn't go over so well. The Maccabees engaged in guerrilla tactics over the course of years, fighting off the Seleucids. And eventually they did. After 6 years, Mattathias dying and his son Judah stepping up as the leader, they finally beat them for good and took back the temple. Of course, then they had to rededicate it, and that takes oil. Lots of oil. And friends, they were just about all out. They could only find 1 can of oil, which is only enough to keep the lights going for 1 day. It was 165 BCE. It wasn't like you could just Postmates for more oil. It took 8 days to get more.
Ain't this place a geographical oddity?
8 days.
From everywhere.
That's why the holiday lasts for 8 days, and funnily enough, that's where an important element of the game of dreidel comes in. The 4 letters on the dreidel symbolize 4 words. Nes, Gadol, Haya, Sham. That means in English, a great miracle happened there. The miracle, of course, being that little bit of oil burnt for all those 8 days. And because a holiday isn't a holiday without symbolic foods, or lack thereof, that's why we eat foods, what else? Deep fried in oil. You may be most familiar with potato latkes, but we also eat jelly donuts called sufganiyot. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty here for any holiday that involves a jelly donut. A winter holiday, by any other name, would be just as commercialized. Hanukkah is observed for 8 days, starting on the day the 25th of Kislev. This means that according to the Roman calendar, Hanukkah can fall pretty much anywhere between late November and early January. One of the reasons that Hanukkah sort of fell out of favor was because of the same reason it succeeded in the first place, the Maccabees. You see, the Maccabees were Hasmoneans, and even though they were priests, they were not of the priestly tribe. That was the Kohanim. Do you know someone with the last name Cohen? You know a member of the Kohanim. A lot of the more traditionalist groups felt that because the Maccabees were Hasmoneans, and because they were a family and kind of built a dynasty, that they were usurpers, and they were not supposed to be there. Some of the rabbis were like, hey, I know, let's take Hanukkah down in importance. Instead, let's celebrate Tisha B'Av. We'll make it a sad holiday where we mourn the destruction of the temple. Okay, now let's fast forward 1800 years and a whole hemisphere over. In the 1800s, there was an influx of Northern European Jews into the United States. These were Jews who were coming mostly from Germany, Holland, and within a generation or so, were generally doing pretty well. And very often were doing well enough that they started to do things like assimilate and step back from tradition and embrace Americanness. Of course, Americanness usually means Christianity, and that leads to things like the synagogue I grew up in, because they were like, hey, we're rich now, we're gonna be like the rich white guys. Yeah, that's how it goes, unfortunately. It's just white supremacy all the way down. After the Immigration Act of 1924, which restricted immigration according to country, there was an assimilationist movement among the people who were coming here for the first time. These were newer and therefore poor Eastern European Jews, and when they arrived, they strove to be more like their predecessors. And of course, their predecessors really didn't want anything to do with them. As Jewish culture got assimilated into the United States, Hanukkah got iterated upon. Because it's the Jewish holiday closest to Christmas, they were like, hey, let's pork barrel this on. Pun intended. Of course, then merchandisers and marketers saw this and they were like, oh, we want in on this action. Suddenly, advertisements started showing up in magazines and newspapers. Hey, buy your kids stuff for Hanukkah. Hey, let's celebrate Hanukkah. And quickly, and pretty much by design, It unfortunately did become Jewish Christmas. After World War II, Hanukkah really made its way into the collective unconscious. As the 20th century wound down, and especially as we hit the 50th anniversary of the end of World War II, the zeitgeist shifted to, dare I say, Judaism positive? Both the opening of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., as well as the premiere of Schindler's List happened in 1993. Then in 1995, Nickelodeon aired the Rugrats Passover special. And in 1996, we reached the pinnacle of cultural achievement, the Rugrats Hanukkah special. No, I'm serious. Like the Passover special before it, Rugrats condensed the story of the holiday into a 22-minute special that was both relatable and entertaining for children. Prince of Egypt came out in 1998, but, well, my opinions about a movie about Passover that premiered a week before Christmas and whose marketing heavily skewed towards evangelical Christian Americans would be a video of its own. The 90s were nice while they lasted. In the intervening 20 years, casual Judaism has made its way into more and more media, giving us characters like Fran Fine, Jake Peralta, Rebecca Bunch, and of course, Midge Maisel. But true acceptance, true assimilation into the amoeba that is American pop culture finally came in the last few years. Hanukkah Hallmark movies. Oh man. Full disclosure, I was a guest on the delightful podcast Netflixmas last year to discuss mistletoe and menorahs. I'm going to put the link in the comments. If it's not about the Stars and Stripes or Jesus Herald Christ, your choices for U.S. cultural understanding are either full-bore appropriation, capitalism, or both. And that brings us to Cinco de Mayo. Going to continue the proud tradition of drinking on camera for YouTube. If you roll into the average chain restaurant in the United States on the 5th of May and go up to a random white person with a margarita in their hand and ask, "What are you celebrating?" more likely than not, you're going to get the answer, Mexican Independence Day. And they would be wrong. That's September 16th, and Mexico gained independence from Spain in 1810. No, Cinco de Mayo celebrates the 1862 victory over the French in the town of Puebla. And much like the Maccabees and this entire comparison that I'm trying to draw here, it took a few years to fully expel the French. They finally kicked them out for good in 1867. Much like St. Patrick's Day before it, Cinco de Mayo has become just an excuse for offensive costumes and codified binge drinking. It started as a holiday celebrated by Mexican Americans in Southern California in 1863. And especially during the labor movements during the mid-20th century, it was, and still is, an important part of Chicano culture in the area. Eventually, however, like so many other things, it got co-opted by the US marketing machine. In the 1980s, beer companies, especially brands like Corona, Dos Equis, and worse, Budweiser, took control of the holiday's narrative in the pop culture sphere. While Mexican cultural centers across the Southwest do hold their own events, you're more likely to see inflatable cactuses, sombreros, serapes, and stick-on mustaches alongside happy hours advertising tequila and nachos. Christmas-centric holiday movies aside, I think Hanukkah came out on top on this one. So what did we learn today? Well, there was never a holiday that the American capitalism machine wasn't ready to grab and run with is really the main takeaway, unfortunately. Tonight, instead of going to Chili's for Frosty Margs, maybe hit up a taqueria and put money in the pockets of a local Mexican-American business. And in December, you can wow your Goyish friends with all this new Hanukkah knowledge. Thank you so much for joining today. I've included a bunch of links down below if you want more information about Judaism and our holidays, as well as more information about Cinco de Mayo and the Battle of Puebla. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and if you want more videos from me, please hit subscribe. Maybe hit that bell? That'd be cool. And if you really want to be a mensch, sign up for my Patreon or maybe throw me some gelt on my Ko-Fi. Thanks again, and see you next time.